Hi everyone, welcome back. So in our last video we finished off by securing the end of the rattan in the back of the grip, and then we let it dry. It's been roughly 24 hours and now we're ready to kind of move on and finish this grip off. You can probably see here I've attached a piece of silk. I just used a little drop of super glue right at the base and put the silk in there. I do it right in the little channel, that way it's all lined up for when we start wrapping that silk. But you can do it, in a couple different locations. I do leave this tag end on, and I'm going to show you why in just a minute, but it's going to kind of help keep our bottom looking nice when we go to put varnish over top of this. Before we get to the silk and the varnish, what I want you to do is just kind of turn the grip in your hand, and if you see any small kind of like little hairs sticking up or little frayed pieces of rattan, just take a scalpel or a razor blade and cut those off. They're just going to get stuck in the varnish and it can make the finished product not look quite as nice. So just give it a little trim up. You might notice on this one even, there are a few small gaps, and those are caused when the rattan shrinks a little bit as it dries out. But that's part of what the silk is going to do. It's going to help kind of define those lines a little bit in a nice uniform way. So if they're not too big, don't worry about it. If they are big, and if they're not covered by silk, you can switch to like size A nylon, and that will generally take care of it. So let's start by wrapping the silk. Now, the reason I started at the little channel here is because it's gonna lead in really well to the bottom of that, and there's nothing real tricky about this. So what we're gonna do is just wrap that silk. We're gonna rotate it, the grip in our hand, and we're gonna stay right between the two wraps as we go up. And what you'll notice is you start to get a nice contrast between those layers of rattan. This can go pretty quick, and I'm not going to show you the whole thing because there's really nothing that tricky about it. I'll just do a few more. And make sure you stay in there. It constantly wants to like wander on you, but stay in until you get all the way to the very top. And what you'll end up with is a nice contrast between the rattan that's really defining things. So I'm going to pause here a minute, and I'm going to start back once I have this the thread wrapped all the way to the top. When you get to the top, you're going to do the same thing. Basically, put a drop of super glue right in the little channel that we cut at the top, or however you attach the rattan, and tie that thread off. So we'll see you in just a minute, and we'll go over how to varnish. Okay, we're back. I finished wrapping the silk all the way to the top, and then I finished it just like I started it. I put a drop of super glue right at the very top, and then just secured the silk and cut it off that way. So I'm going to hold this up here and see if we can't focus on it. And you can start to see the nice contrast that we're getting in that grip. The individual strands of rattan are becoming nicely defined. Now it's time to apply varnish that's going to protect it. And here's the reason I leave this little like pigtail on the end. I use just a little simple jig I made to hold this while I varnish it. And I slip it over, and you'll notice that little tail keeps the bottom from touching the base. And so when the varnish kind of comes down, it's not going to pool at the bottom or end up sticking the grip to the base. So for finish, I'm going to use spar varnish. I use it full strength. If you want to cut it, feel free to cut it however thick you want or thin you want. And the only trick I recommend on, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see the top here, is when I get started, for the first coat in particular, I don't brush down on the grip, because what can happen is you can dislodge some of that thread. So for the first coat, I'll start at the top, and I'm going to go perpendicular to the grip with my brush strokes. And again, I'm using a pretty thin or a pretty light coat here. We don't need anything too heavy. We want to keep that rattan, keep some feel on that rattan. So we'll just come around, and again, this really only applies to the first coat. If you do a second or even a third coat, if you're using thin varnish, then it's a non-issue because everything's secure at that point. So we just come around, making sure that that silk stays where it's supposed to. And you'll notice after the first coat that the grip is taking on a little warmer tone. And with each subsequent coat, the grip's going to become a little more darker, take on a little bit more of the amber color from that spar varnish. And just continue down all the way to the bottom and let it dry for a few hours or overnight, and then apply a second, and if you want, a third coat. So I'm going to jump to one that I did the other day that's dry. And you can see how that's taken on. Let's see if we can focus on it. A nice amber tone. Has a real finish, kind of polished look to it, but the varnish isn't so heavy that I can't feel the rattan in my hand. So now for the final fitting, I use sandpaper for this. This is 220, and that's kind of how I finish these off with. But if you want to start with maybe 120 or 150 or something, to be a little more aggressive. So we noticed the bottom of our grip, we had a little bit of that cork exposed where we tied it off. So what I do, I just hold that grip, put that sandpaper on something flat, and I'll just move it back and forth to take off that cork and smooth everything out on the bottom. And then I'll move through the various grades of sandpaper until I get a nice, flat, smooth surface where there's no cork showing on my reel seat. And you can see here, we've got the seat on now. There's zero cork showing on the back because we measured that right. And you can do the same for the front if you happen to have a little bit of a rough edge, or if one of those pieces kind of slid up on you as you started the wrap. Just take some 220 and very lightly sand it, and if you scuff it up a little bit, you can just touch that up with a little spar varnish when it's all done, and you should be all set. But that's pretty much it for the video. Again, through this whole video we've used the Proof Fly Fishing rattan kit. We do sell the individual components as well. So thanks for watching, and good luck making rattan grips. Thanks. Bye.